Okay, good morning. I want to thank you all for joining us here today. We're here to urge passage of two bills that are aimed at stemming the horrific tide of human trafficking. We want the bills to pass and we want the bills to be signed. And I want to begin by thanking two district attorneys who've taken a huge role in the effort to stem human trafficking for years in California and have been solidly behind the two bills we're going to discuss today. To my right is DA Bonnie Dumanis from San Diego County, and to my left, DA Paul Zellerbach from Riverside County. They've been important allies in this battle, and they will have some words to say to you when I conclude. First of all, the problem itself. The problem is growing. Human trafficking cases filed in San Diego federal court have increased by more than 600% in the last 5 years. That's more than just a trend. It's a full-blown epidemic. And we're finding that gangs now take human trafficking to be really their enterprise of choice when it comes to making money to enrich their coffers, to buy weapons, to do the things that gangs do to prey on society. So we need to do all we can to fight this growing gang enterprise. SB 473, Senate Bill 473, adds human trafficking to a list of 33 other crimes that are defined in California as Step Act crimes or gang crimes under the California Street Terrorism Enforcement and Prevention Act. Gangs are using these human trafficking endeavors really almost as an ATM machine. They made $97 million in revenue in San Diego alone in 2007. And that's more dollars than they made in 2007 in drug trafficking, according to the Urban Institute study. Including this crime among Step Act crimes, human trafficking, will trigger enhanced prosecution techniques, will trigger enhanced probation and parole conditions, will in many ways affect the way a case is handled by all stakeholders in the system. And you'll hear more about that from our district attorneys who are here. It's important to note that SB 473 is supported by Crime Victims United. It's supported by the California DA's Association, the Child Abuse Prevention Centers, the California State Sheriff's Association, and many others. The bill is on the Assembly floor right now. When it passes off of the Assembly floor, it will go to the Senate for a vote on concurrence. I have complete confidence this bill will do very well in both locations. It's had no votes yet in its entire process through the legislature. Second bill we're talking about today, Senate Bill 939. Senate Bill 939 allows courts to consolidate related charges of pimping, pandering, and human trafficking into a single trial when these offenses occur in multiple jurisdictions. So, for example, the folks who pimp and pander, traffic these young victims, often young victims, usually do it or often do it in almost a circuit. They'll traffic some of these young women in San Diego this week, Riverside next week, LA the week after, then Sacramento, then San Francisco, and they may be actually caught in these acts in various jurisdictions. And right now, prosecution has to be done separately by separate district attorneys' offices, which makes prosecution more difficult, which is more costly to the judicial system. We know our courts are hurting for money. And most importantly, it means that these human trafficking victims who have been so terrorized during their young lives have to go from one jurisdiction to another in order to testify against those who had imprisoned them. What 939 does, it streamlines this. It says that if the district attorneys of various jurisdictions disagree, they can consolidate a case into one jurisdiction, saving money, and more importantly, saving the victim from having to go through multiple horrific episodes of testifying against their former captor. SB 939 is supported by Crime Victims United. It's supported by Californians Against Slavery, supported by the California District Attorneys Association and the California State Sheriff's Association. 939 is now on the Senate floor for concurrence. It's already cleared the Assembly. It has also had no votes in the entire process, and we expect it to go to the governor's office for signature soon. With me here to tell you more about these bills, as I mentioned earlier, are two of the fine district attorneys in our state who have been longtime allies in the battle against human trafficking. First, we'll hear from San Diego County District Attorney Bonnie Dumanis.
Thank you, Senator. Before I begin, I just want to introduce to my right Summer Steffen, who is with me today. She's a chief deputy from our office and has long been involved as a leader in the fight against human trafficking as well. I want to thank Senator Block for his leadership. Clearly from his comments, he knows a lot about this topic and feels very passionate in this area. Over a 4-year period in San Diego County, cases prosecuted under sex trafficking statutes have more than tripled. Last year, 43 defendants in our county were charged with human trafficking-related offenses. That same year, we identified 50 human trafficking victims, including 9 minors. It's clear that human trafficking is on the rise. One of the most troubling trends that we're seeing is gangs getting into the business of human trafficking, and they're taking it to a whole new level. It's a trend that isn't unique to San Diego County. Increasingly, gang members are pimping out young girls and women for the benefit of the gang. And we're talking about young girls from our neighborhoods, the average age 12 to 14. In some cases, it's replacing drug trafficking as the preferred funding source. Rival gangs are really joining together to become entrepreneurs because it is so lucrative. In fact, about half of human trafficking-related cases we prosecuted last year involved gangs. That's why it's so important that both of these bills become law. In particular, I'm here to speak about Senate Bill 473. It takes direct aim at gang members who would victimize young women in communities across the state of California. This bill would add human trafficking as an offense that can be used to establish a pattern of gang activity. It's a small change in the law, but it's a dynamic change in the law. It's making a big difference. Gangs and gang activity is dynamic and changing. We're reflecting what's happening actually on the street right now. Gang members are always trying to stay one step ahead of the law. When it comes to human trafficking, they're using all the trademark gang trappings of fear and intimidation to pimp out these girls. And when they focus their criminal activity on human trafficking, it makes it harder for those of us in law enforcement to prosecute them. In short, traffickers are slipping through a loophole in the law. Senate Bill 473 closes that loophole. It will help prosecutors build our cases against gang members and help us hold them accountable for these terrible crimes. I want to thank Senator Block again for his leadership ongoing in this area, and DA Zellerbach for his leadership as well in the fight against human trafficking. At the San Diego District Attorney's Office, we've stepped up our efforts to prosecute and prevent human trafficking. These bills are another important tool in our toolbox. It's important that those of us in law enforcement recognize crime trends like the increase in human trafficking in California, and then working alongside representatives like Senator Block and his colleagues, we respond with common sense, effective legislation like these 2 bills. Thank you. Shall I turn it over to District Attorney Zellerbach?
Thank you. Good morning. Again, my name is Paul Zellerbach, and I'm the District Attorney for Riverside County. I have been a prosecutor for 26 years, and I have to tell you that human trafficking is one of the most insidious crimes that is often hidden in plain sight. It occurs in front of us every day in every community. And therefore, that's what makes these 2 bills extremely important to pass. We know that human trafficking is the fastest growing crime in the state of California presently. And next to narcotics trafficking, human trafficking is the most profitable criminal enterprise in America. The United Nations has told us and informed us that human trafficking is a $32 billion a year industry that enslaves as many as 27 million people worldwide. When a criminal or a gang member traffics in human lives, he has a reusable commodity. Unlike when you're trafficking drugs or guns, when you're trafficking people, that's a commodity that can be reused over and over again in different cities and in different counties throughout our state. It is the type of crime that has no geographical limitations whatsoever. The crime or the criminal oftentimes moves the victim from one city to another or from one county to another. And that's what SB 939 is all about. As Senator Block indicated, Senate Bill 939 allows prosecutors to combine all of these crimes, whether they occur in different counties throughout the state of California or not, into one criminal prosecution by the agreement of the district attorneys from those jurisdictions. And by doing so, we create a system in criminal justice where we're more efficient and we're more effective. And as Senator Block also pointed out, and more importantly, the victim, oftentimes a young girl, only has to testify once and go through that traumatic experience in reliving the horrific things that have been done to her, rather than having to testify in each county, in each jurisdiction, for each separate trial. So it's easy to understand how this bill is so significant when it comes to the prosecution of human trafficking crimes in California. It dramatically changes the playing field. And as District Attorney Bonnie Dumanis indicated, we're now catching up with the criminals who get involved in these types of activities and crimes. So what it will do, it will provide prosecutors the ability to join not just the human trafficking crimes themselves, but it expands to different areas of pimping and pandering, which is oftentimes correlates or goes along with human trafficking. And we can add those charges as well. And I would like to also thank Senator Block and his staff and the San Diego County DA's office for taking the leadership position with respect to these two bills and fighting human trafficking throughout the state of California. Thank you.
At this point, we're happy to take any questions you might have. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. So these bills seem like they primarily deal with the fallout of human trafficking, prosecuting those who are involved in it. What can the state do to help prevent human trafficking in the first place?
Well, I have a bill this year that I've co-authored with Senator Holly Mitchell, which actually adds human trafficking to the curriculum in, I think it's in high schools, so that young students know what to look out for, what to be aware of when they are approached by these gang members. I first got involved in this when a woman from one of my constituents came to me and said that one of her daughter's friends, this was a junior high school girl, one of her daughter's friends had been asked to go on a joyride with a friend and went on the joyride and never came back. And it turns out, several months later after we had met, this girl did show up back on her mother's doorstep and told the most horrific story of how she went on this ride thinking it would just be a good time, but it was a gang member who took her, and the ride turned into months and months of captivity and repeated rapes, both for pay and not for pay. Of course, none of the pay going to her, but going to her captor. By getting to children early, and again, I think this bill does extend into junior high school as well, will hopefully warn them that this is not something to trifle with.
And another point, there was a bill that was passed last year that took effect January of this year that requires each county and each jurisdiction to post notices in all kinds of different areas, in the bus terminals, the train stations, liquor stores, where these people will have access to. And it has a 1-800 number, and it's an awareness issue with respect to making people aware of human trafficking and giving the victims somewhere where they can go or call.
And from a perspective of not even counting on the law, district attorneys up and down the state are adding prevention in schools to discuss this with the kids and upping the ante with all the community groups that we've been talking to. Seroptimus has chosen this as their high priority. Many other groups are choosing this as well, the YWCA in Los Angeles. So I think it's incumbent on all of us to talk about this, to share it with kids, but also with parents to tell them the warning signs. And I, again, applaud Senator Block for his bill. That's certainly an important tool. And by having these tools, we again have people talking about this issue that is so critical to all of us. And as Senator Block said, what a story that his constituent told about her daughter.
Any other questions?
I do have one more.
Sure.
Are we talking mostly, when the girls who are being human trafficked, are they primarily immigrants, or are they, because you guys are talking a lot, it seems like, typical people in school. Who are we looking at?
We're looking at both, and maybe one of the DAs might have statistics in terms of which is more. Human trafficking includes a lot of things. It includes forced labor, often of immigrants, whether from China or from south of the border, but also includes forced prostitution, and there we find a lot of local young girls, and these are girls, not women. Young girls are the victims of trafficking, and these are, girls from California.
From our perspective, San Diego is on the border, but that's not what we're seeing mostly. We're seeing girls from our schools that are being pimped and pandered and trafficked by our gangs that are joining together, that ordinarily oppose one another, to make a lot of money. There is some trafficking that comes across the border. In fact, I went down to the border, and what they talked about, which was actually interesting, was that most of the people that are coming across the border aren't actually from Mexico. They're coming from other countries through Mexico. And more of that is in terms of slave labor and in terms of work that we're seeing the immigrant population. But in terms of the sexual exploitation, it's our girls, and that's what makes it so insidious, is it's right in front of us, and we have to take action now.
Anyone else have a question? If not, we will all be available here for individual interviews, should you choose to do that. With that, we conclude the press conference. Thank you all for attending. Thank you, Bonnie.